Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at something I'm guessing most of you wouldn't have guessed that I'd be reviewing. You guys know I haven't looked at Revoltech stuff in a very long time, and I just generally don't collect it. It's not really my cup of tea. But I've heard that they have improved a lot of their quality control issues, and a lot of people have asked me to review them. So I put in a call, so to speak, to my Big Bad Toy Store contacts, and they helped me out to be able to review some things for you guys that I might not otherwise have reviewed. So big thanks to them for that. And as always, guys, I do have a link in the description below for Big Bad Toy Store. It's the only online collectible shop I fully trust. I've been using them for years. I use them exclusively if I'm not importing something from Japan. So check them out, link in the description below. It helps out the channel a whole bunch. Anyway, this figure, Revoltech THOR, amazing Yamaguchi THOR. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there are a lot of the same issues I had with Revoltech before, but there are a lot of things that are much improved. So I think this will be interesting for some of you who maybe aren't on top of the Revoltech stuff, and we'll see if you guys like this by the end of the video. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. Alrighty, before we look at the figure, I'll give you a quick look at my package. It is not a window box, which I don't care for. I never like not being able to see the product. Even if you're only going to buy it online, a lot of people do collect in box, and I think for them it's definitely a problem. But let me know what you guys think about this, especially a package like this. It's like modern and sleek, I get it, but I like windows. Nice photography, sure, but I saw the promo images on the website. I don't need them on the box. Like, that's good, obviously they're going to be on the back, but I want a window. Let me know what you guys think about that. Nice quality box though. All right, not okay. Anyway, so this guy stands about 6.5 inches tall if you don't want to count the thickness of his helmet. That's going to make him roughly, we'll call it 16.5 centimeters. There is obviously some thickness at the top of the helmet and then the earpieces, but for scaling purposes, we don't count that. But you can tell obviously how tall he is overall. He's about the same height as Darwin if you count where his head would be, so he's just a touch taller. Definitely scalable with Marvel Legends, I would say. Now, obviously, he's going to be too small for this scale, because Thor would be huge compared to Batman, and then obviously too small for that. But yeah, you could definitely fudge it into Marvel Legends, I would say. And probably most of the import companies these days are creeping closer to that larger size, so I think that's reasonable. Okay, before we get into it, let's do a quick question of the day. How do you guys balance the desire for articulation and the desire for a figure to look good? For me, it has to be a good balance, and it is, this is personally, it is more dependent on the character itself. For instance, a big, thick guy who's not going to be in crazy dynamic poses, I'm going to lean a little bit more towards the aesthetic. Somebody like Spider-Man, I want the articulation, but there's always that caveat for the articulation. It has to look good. I don't care if it can pose really well if it looks like a pile of Legos. And so that's one of the reasons I've kind of shied away from the Revoltech stuff. They tend to look pretty goofy when not in crazy poses. Personally, that's my thing. Let me know what you guys think about that. So, speaking of that, let's get into the aesthetic on this figure. I will say the QC is much improved on this figure over the previous ones that I've looked at. The skin tone, I'll say, is a little bit orange. It's nothing I can't live with. It's okay, but it's definitely a little bit orange. I love the finish, though. It's a really nice matte finish. There is shading throughout the skin, so that looks really good. The paint job on the rest of the figure, other than a few things being glossy, you can see here on the wrist wrap, for instance, and his hammer handle is like that too. Like, that shouldn't be glossy, but other than that, it's nicely done. The pants, for instance, very clean, very, very clean, and the little studs and things. Like, it's not the most elaborate thing ever. There's no shading in the torso, but what's there is clean and does look good. There's shading in the hair. They're very stylized figures, so you have to be okay with that, of course. But yeah, it's definitely a higher quality figure than they have made in the past. Nice quality cape. There is wire in it, works well enough. It doesn't hold up though. I don't know, is the wire not connected into the chest, or is it just too heavy? Yeah, it looks to me like the wire doesn't go into the chest, which is never the way you want to do it. If you're gonna have a wired cape, the wire needs to be anchored into the plastic so that you can actually use it. This is just gonna really be for adjustments. Like, you're not gonna do any crazy posing with it where the cape is up in the air, because you can't. But still, it's a nice wired cape. We'll get to that later. So yeah, it's a nice quality figure. It looks good. Looks good. Again, we're talking objectively, stylistically, that's totally your call. And we're going to talk about the articulation here too. So, but as far as like quality control, paints, that kind of thing, it's nice. The sculpt, Not counting articulation, the sculpt is good. It's very stylized, of course. He's just roided out completely in the arms. Relatively small legs, narrow torso. It's a very stylized figure, but what is there, what they were aiming for is well done. Texture on the clothing in here. Yeah, it looks nice. It's pretty solid. So, that's all good, but we have to balance the articulation and the sculpt, the aesthetic. And I have to say, they still don't do it well enough if you ask me. Is Revoltech good for dynamic poses? Absolutely. Are they good enough for dynamic poses that it's worth all of this huge cutting out and such? For me personally, it's not even close. I still don't prefer that. Now, I'll happily pose this figure in a crazy pose and leave him there and it's fine, but for me, not being able to leave a figure in a neutral stance with it looking good, that's kind of a problem. Because a lot of these things, and as we get into the articulation, I'll show you, they don't need to be as garish as they are. Or for instance, you can't do even basic stuff without it looking weird, like just having him raise his arm like that. You get this giant, cavernous, weird spot. So it's like, you have to trade off for things. And for me personally, this whole style of engineering, it's not ever going to be worth the trade-off, if you ask me. Because you can get pretty close to the same level of posing without that. But they do choose to do it that way, and you know what it is going into it, so you have to make that call. I don't know. Objectively, I'm going to say that's what they're going for, and that's reasonable, but because it could be a lot better still, I mean, still have the range, but also look better, I'm only going to give him an 8 for the aesthetic. He looks really solid. No, you know what? I'm going to do 7 for the aesthetic, because he is $130 at Big Bad Toy Store. That's where I buy all my stuff. Like I said, that's why I always use them as the quote. They're like the store for America. And if you're going to import it, people like to say you can get stuff cheaper. Yes. There is an exchange rate situation going on where it's sometimes beneficial. It's always beneficial exchange rate wise to go overseas, but you have to pay for shipping and stuff. So you guys can figure all that out. I'm just telling you, I buy stuff at Big Bad Toy Store. So that's why I use their pricing. But $130, I think it's worth it. But for that price, I think that it needs to look a little better. Let me just put it that way. All right, like they need to clean up some of these gaps, even like with the connections from the biceps to the shoulders, things like that. I think they need as much space inside those joints, that kind of stuff. Now, they do not disappoint with accessories. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So you already saw the head with the helmet on it. That's nice. You get another head without the helmet. That's fine. So those are 2 faceplates there, just kind of like a stern neutral face. Then you get 5 other faceplates, one with the lightning thing going on, and then just some various other looking in different direction type faceplates. Usable for a variety of things. You get 2 fist hands, and then you get 8 more hands for holding the hammer, style pose hands, and then a couple of hands here that have the holes in them. And that is so that you can put a ball hinge in there and connect the hammer to that so it looks like he's swinging the hammer like he's taken off for flight or just swinging it around as a weapon. So that's very cool. You get the little ball hinge for that, of course. You do get his hammer, which looks very nice, other than the glossy handle like I mentioned before, but you do get the hammer. That's good. You get an alternate hammer, which has a couple of holes in it for lightning effects, so that's pretty good. And then if you like lightning effects, guys, you get a ton here. You get 1 giant one for a variety of uses. Then you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I got all of them. 10 other lightning effects that go all over his body and on his head and everything, and it looks awesome. And then on top of that, you do also get a really nice display stand. It's definitely one of the nicer display stands, I'll say. Revoltech does do that well. So that's a great spread of accessories. There's only 1 accessory I think it's missing, and that's the spinning hammer effect. So that's a bit of a bummer, but I'm still going to go 9.5 out of 10. Even at the price point, there's a ton of stuff going on here. Real quick note, maybe you Revoltech guys can tell me what this is for. It looks like the type of tool you use to pop off like faceplates and maybe pose eyeballs on a figure with posable eyes, but he doesn't have that, and the faceplates aren't super hard to do. So let me know what you think this is for. If you collect a lot of Revoltech, maybe you have an idea, but maybe it's just for the faceplates. I don't know. Okay, so far, the aesthetic has been questionable. You kind of know that going in. Accessories have been awesome. Let's see how the articulation is. It has to be amazing because it doesn't look good good because of it. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, we'll just pop the head off. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Okay, so this is a floating piece. The hair and the back of the helmet, a floating piece, which is nice. Then you have a double ball peg in there for the head, which is exactly how you should do it. And this works surprisingly well. The way they have it cut out, the cape and the hair don't really mess with each other too much. It works nicely. The neck is also on a ball peg. So that's good. It's a big chunky neck. There is a big gap in there that I think they could have avoided. So that's a little bit unfortunate, leaning his head back. But with the head on there, you're not really going to lean it back too far, I'm guessing, because of the hair. Oh, you can still do it. So yeah, just make sure. Again, you're going to do a lot of hiding of gaps with this figure. Like, you just can't avoid it. So there is a gap there, but good range. Otherwise, you can move that head around pretty darn well. All right, that's good. Oh, I want to mention this. One of the reasons I'm trying to get back into Revoltech is they have replaced some of the joints that I hate with joints that I love. We'll get into that a little bit more as we go. This is not one of them. I still hate this design. Every time they put a little tiny ball joint on a big shoulder, it's not as good as it should be. They do it so that you can have this kind of hollowed out, and at least they sculpt theirs to some degree. You can see the veins and stuff, but it's still a giant, weird, ugly gap. They do that. Well, normally they do that so you can bring the arm down to the side better or bring it across the chest better, but it doesn't really work that well on this guy. Even when you use the rotation on this piece here, which we'll talk about in a moment, it doesn't work that well. So the trade-off just isn't there. You can achieve that kind of posability very easily with a rotation in where the butterfly joint is, like an angled rotation, and then just a nice big ball hinge. And a big ball hinge in here will actually give you better range than the little one with the cavity for most things, and you don't get this giant cavity. So that's why I don't care for this type of shoulder. It does have some slight benefit here and there if executed properly. I'm not sure this guy actually sees much of it. Bringing the arm down to the side works, but you can do that on lots of figures. And for me personally, I'd rather have a little bit of a carve out right here if necessary than a giant gap here to where you can't even pose his arm well. So that's a bit of an issue. But you do get the ball peg in this part, which does allow you to do some weird adjustment posing, which is potentially useful if you're going to go really crazy with the posing. And then you do get a bicep swivel here. The offset is quite strange because of the way they have that cutout going. It's a really weird combo, and you're going to spend a lot of time on this figure when you're posing it, making it look good in the poses that it can achieve because you have weird gapping. For the elbow, it's the same sort of situation, ball peg, ball hinge combo. You get decent range out of the bend, and it looks fine, I guess, unless you look at it this way, in which case you have a giant gap, and you can kind of get rid of that, but then you lose some of that range. So if you want to keep it at 90, it looks decent. If you want to bend it farther, you can put your finger in his arm. So, you know, some kind of situations like that. For this part, I thought they had it set up differently based on the photos. It really just rotates a little bit here. And if you go back too far, you're all kinds of gappy in there. And if you go forward too far, you can't really do it. But he does look like a Marvel Legends figure with his shoulders up to the front, which is fine, because if you're having him like lean over and do like a Wolverine pose or something, you know, like a strongman pose, that's fine, that's useful. But if you want him to just stand in the neutral with his shoulders back like a hero would be doing, you would have him like back there. It doesn't quite really line up right, and you get gaps and the shoulders get ugly and weird, and it just looks awkward in a lot of poses that aren't specifically crazy dynamic. So be aware of that. Little tiny ball hinge wrists works nicely, no problem there. Now this is something I love. This torso. They used to have the weird ball hinge, ball peg combos and things, and now it's just ball peg. And it works really well. Ball peg all over the place. That's the way it's supposed to be. His side to side isn't great, I'm guessing because of these, but it has really solid range, for sure. And then this is actually a floating piece, but essentially there's another ball peg down here. And so you can do that forward and back down here, and side to side, not as much, but it's there. And rotation. So he can really lean over well, very, very nicely. And he can really lean back well, and it gets gappy, but just don't go that far. But really, really good range. Love that torso. That was one of the main selling features for me, is that they fixed those joints and they don't have those crappy ratcheted joints anymore. So his diaper piece or his skirt or whatever you want to call it, this one wiggles this way. These guys are connected back here and they wiggle around. And so they move around well enough for his legs. The belt is floaty in general too, so plenty of movement there. Now for the hips, you just get big old ball sockets in there with a thigh swivel on top, though the thigh swivel on top you don't really tend to use too much because the ball sockets are done well. So you get a lot of thigh swivel just on that ball. But if you need more, that ball socket will work for you. Or I mean the thigh swivel at the bottom will work for you in addition to that ball socket. So that's good. Bringing the legs forward, not as much as I would have liked. I was expecting a little bit better range with the floating belt. It's not bad, it's perfectly fine horizontal. And then going to the back, they go back pretty far, and kicks out to the side some, but decent. And then out to the side, full on splits. A little bit of maneuvering going on in there, but essentially full on splits, that's good. Single jointed knee, I love the simplicity of these knee joints. They've been doing these for a while, and when they do them well, they look good. When they don't, they look bad, but they work well. You get better than 90 degrees, and they're relatively aesthetically pleasing, so that's good. Simple joints are generally good joints. You still get a boot swivel with a ball peg. I'm not sure why they bother. You don't really get that much useful range out of it, but it's there. And it is a little bit weird to me that it's blue underneath. I'm not sure if that was oversight or intentional, but it looks to me like that's supposed to be one piece, the black. But you get rotation there if you need it, and a little bit of extra range if you need that, but it looks like the leg's broken if you use it, so whatever. Alright, then for the ankles, you get a ball peg, ball hinge combo. Bringing the foot forward, not the most range, it's not bad, but it's fine. And then bringing the foot back, all the range you could want, that's good. Ankle rocker is solid as a result of the ball hinge, so that's good. And then the toe hinge. They did it correctly. I always harp on this for companies because there's no reason to do it the other way. This should always be flush. The diameter of the pinned joint should be the same as the thickness of the foot, fully. You shouldn't have like a question mark shape where there's an extra chunk cut out. This is exactly how you do it. And they actually did it pretty well. It's relatively solid, so it's not going to be too floppy if you want to use it. So that's pretty good. Alright, and then last thing, I'll mention the cape again briefly. The wire in the cape is solid enough. It's not too thin, but it doesn't anchor into the body. So it's just a floaty cape, which is not great. Okay, so all of that being said, he does pose really well. The caveat being, he is ugly as a result of it. And he can look great in poses, but you're going to have to spend a lot of time trying to make him look great, and that's only in the poses that he looks great in. If you want neutral stances at all, anything relatively neutral, it's not going to look good. And even in the dynamic poses, I do think they need to finesse their joints a little bit more so that they don't look terrible. Like, there's no reason he has this much gap going on up here in the neutral stance. Make that joint if you want to, but clean it up. So for his articulation functionality-wise, I'm going to say it's going to get 8. I'm going to say 8. It's not as good as it should be considering how ugly it is. That's a problem. If you're going to make it ugly, it needs to be really good. And he really doesn't have like an exceptionally good butterfly, for instance. It's there, but it's not great. Not being able to raise the arm up without it looking hideous, not great. Lots of trade-offs on these figures. So, time for the final verdict. Are the trade-offs worth it is really what it boils down to. Objectively, it's what they're going for, and they do it fairly well. There's no doubt about it. And now that there's no quality control issue problem, or at least not that I've experienced, that's a very good thing. Again, as objectively as I can make it, I don't think they make the joints good enough, given the ugly trade-off. Subjectively, it's not my thing. I'm going to really enjoy putting him in a crazy pose, but never touch him again sort of deal. I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, but I'm going to give you 2 ratings. One is my personal opinion, and one is the objective rating as best as I can make it. Objectively, for the price point, given the accessories and the aesthetic and the articulation and everything, it's still definitely a solid figure. So if you can get past the issues, I think he's still an 8 out of 10. You're getting a lot of figure for your money, even though it's expensive. I think it's a good trade-off. It's nowhere near as bad as the $130 because they're basically the same price Guts figure that came with virtually nothing and can't even hold his sword. So, definitely a solid figure. I'd say 8 out of 10 for my objective rating. For my subjective rating, I'm going to knock it down to only a 7 because I still enjoy the figure, but the trade-off is just not good enough for me. The aesthetic thing bothers me too much subjectively. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. But that's it for me for today, so thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you should. I have new videos almost every single day. I'll get back to that pretty soon. And I do have thousands of videos already on the channel, so make sure you come back for all of that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.